In this exercise, we're going to trace the spirals on our template layer. A little bit of an aside before we get down to the spiral tool once again. I want you to note that spacebar technique works just as well with the other tools. So for example, if I grab this line tool and start dragging with it, and then I press and hold the spacebar, then I can move the line to a different location. When I get its endpoint exactly where I want it to be, like so, let's say, then I'd release the spacebar and drag a little more. So that's a terrific technique that works with all the drawing tools inside of Illustrator. I'll go ahead and undo that modification. Something else that tends to work with these line tools is you can double click on a tool icon here inside this floating panel if you've got it set up, or inside of the toolbox. I could double click there as well. And then you could say, in the future, I'm going to want a bunch of 200-point lines, all of which are exactly horizontal, let's say. And then I'd click OK. Now that doesn't draw anything, that just changes the default settings. And then if I click inside of my illustration, up comes my default settings, I click OK, and away I go. That also works, by the way, with the arc tool. You can double click on it, change its settings. Notice that this base along setting, that goes ahead and flips the arc. So that's the same as pressing that F key, which I wish worked along with the spiral tool, but doesn't. Anyway, you can change your settings here if you want to in order to establish new defaults. And of course, you can also click with the arc tool. However, while you can take the spiral tool and you can click with it in order to draw a spiral from the dialog box, and that does affect the default settings, I do want you to know that does change the new default behavior for the tool. I'll cancel out. Inexplicably, you can't double click on the tool here inside the panel. I don't know why that is. Anyway, I just thought I'd keep you abreast of things here. Now let's actually draw a spiral. If I click with the tool, I've got things set up so that we're spiraling in a clockwise direction from the center out. So I'll cancel out of there. I've also got a decay value of 80%. I recommend you work with that. And I'll draw from about here, I'm thinking, over to the heart. And look at me. I was thinking totally wrong. Look at that tool behave in a way that I cannot predict even after a billion years of using it. Anyway, I went ahead and pressed the space bar to move it over a little bit, and then I'll drag over to this location, and I'm getting close, but I want to get it exactly right, let's say. Why? Just because I want to give you a sense of how this tool behaves and how you're constantly pressing the space bar to adjust it just a little more, like so, and then drawing a little to see if you got it right, and then finding out you didn't, and then pressing the space bar a little more to adjust its positioning, and then trying again, and so on. And that's a pretty near match, so I'm going to go ahead and accept that. Notice I have an extra segment right there on the inside, so I'm going to press the down arrow key to get rid of it. And now I have a 9-segment spiral that more or less matches the spiral in my template. I'll release right there on that guide intersection in order to align the end of my spiral exactly with the bottom of the heart. And I get this line there. Now, of course, I want a thicker stroke, so I'll go ahead and change the stroke value up here in the control panel to 10 point like so. And incidentally, you might be wondering, why do I keep calling this the control panel, which is its name, that's why, when it's labeled path? Well, it's not the path panel. What that is the object type. In other words, Illustrator is telling you what kind of object you have selected. So if I were to meatball the arrow over here in the layers panel, I would see that I have a group selected, which ends up being very helpful. Like right now, I know, because I created it not that long ago, I know the arrow is a group of objects. But you can have sublayers inside of Illustrator, so layers within layers, and they look very similar to groups. And then you can have all kinds of other items like compound shapes and compound paths and all kinds of stuff we're going to see in the future. And it's very difficult here in the layers panel to distinguish one from the other, and they have different behaviors. So you can always find out what kind of object you have selected up here in the control panel. You can even have an entire layer selected if you meatball that layer, and you'll see up here in the control panel, sure enough, I've selected a layer. All right, anyway, I'm going to press Control-Shift-A or Command-Shift-A on the Mac to deselect everything, and I'm going to draw the next spiral, this guy right there, and I'm going to do that same thing I did before with fussing around with the space bar until I get it right. And this is looking pretty good. And this time I'm not trying to snap the end to anything. I'm just trying to more or less align the end of that spiral with the heart. However, I could create a guide. If I'm really interested in snapping exactly to that heart, I could turn the heart into a guide. And you know what? That's a terrific idea. So I'm going to delete that last spiral, and I'm going to show you how to turn that heart into a guide in the next exercise.